What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Nick, and I have a States of Metal for you. I haven't done one of these in a while, and actually I've been kind of cooking up another batch of them. And as I said from the last one, I want to cover some more neighboring states, and that is Kentucky. That's right, we're going over the Bluegrass State. Our bourbon-loving neighbors to the south. Well, all right, like mostly bourbon-loving. 95% of the world's bourbon is produced there, but there's still such a thing as like dry counties down there, which is... I don't know. I don't fucking get that. I'll say going into like the, factoids and such about this state, there's a lot of things that I don't quite get. Like, namely how this state is among one of the poorest states in the United States, but it's also the home of Fort Knox. That's some seriously cruel irony there. Outside of like that cruel irony, it is home to, I believe, some of the largest cave systems in the United States. You could probably fit every cavernous death metal act in the United States in these caves in Kentucky, and there's a good chance that all of them would want to record a live album or a demo in there. Kentucky is also home to at least one half of the Hatfield-McCoy's land disputes, feud, whatever, the OG family feud, except they didn't settle it with Steve Harvey, they settled it with bullets. The city of Middlesboro is, I believe, the only city in the United States that is built inside of a meteor impact crater, which is, kind of cool. Hopefully that whole adage about lightning not striking twice in the same spot also applies to meteors. This is also, obviously, the home of the Kentucky Derby for those that like horse racing and women in large hats and gambling debt. One particular story that I came across in terms of the state's history and I guess its politics was the story of Honest Dick Tate. Back in the 1880s, he was their much-loved state treasurer. Everyone seemed to think he was honest, otherwise I don't know why they gave him that nickname. But guess what? He wasn't. While in office, he stole about $500,000, which back in the 1880s, it's like stealing like hundreds of millions now. I don't know if they changed his name to Lying Prick Tate, but they probably should have. This is also another state that claims to have invented the cheeseburger, which this is like the third or fourth time I think I've run into that. I don't know, no one seems to be able to keep shit straight, but that's U.S. history. Speaking of U.S. history and prominent figures that are associated with the state of Kentucky, Colonel Sanders was not born in Kentucky. He was actually born in Indiana. He also spent a lot of time in Canada too, which was pretty wild. But he is the godfather of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which started in Utah. Yeah, Kentucky, I guess, only partially gets to claim him, or maybe the recipe. Yeah, I kind of figured like the Colonel and KFC would be like entirely rooted in Kentucky, and well, I was way off. Actually, when I did Utah, I think I brought up the whole KFC thing, which I was a little shocked by. Anyway, Kentucky's also got some weird laws, and this is always one of my favorite parts to go over. And fair warning, when you get further into the Bible Belt here in the United States, the laws get even weirder. Like, for example, it is illegal to display a reptile in church services in Kentucky. Obviously, there's a bit of a loophole for the lunatics that like to hold up venomous snakes and, well, let nature take its course, but that just seems like an oddly specific law. Anyway, moving on, and I'm gonna have to read this one directly because there's a lot of stupid specifics. Selling dyed baby ducks, chicks, or bunnies is illegal unless sold in groups of 6 or more. Okay, why? Like, why 6 or more? Why isn't it just illegal, like, outright? Why is it illegal in the first place? Like, is the dye harsh on the animals? I can totally understand that. But if that's the reason why it was made illegal, then why is it okay if you sell them in bundles of 6 or more? Were the dyed ones selling a bit better on an individual basis versus, someone just selling regular ducks, bunnies, and chicks? I don't know. Why was this even a thing? I feel like whoever was writing down this law should have just caught themselves like halfway through writing it down and just gone, wait, this is fucking stupid. That's what should have happened, but I guess it didn't. All right, next law, and this one's fucking really stupid too. No woman in a bikini can appear on a highway unless accompanied by at least 2 cops or armed with a club. Now again, I wonder at what frequency this scenario happened. Like there was just this rash of bikini-clad women walking down the street, and the brilliant minds that are running the state were like, well, let's either get a couple officers to escort them wherever they're going, or just give them like, a giant chunk of fucking wood and like, here, you're all good now. That should protect you from everything. Yeah, for future visitors to the United States, which I don't recommend it right now, 0 out of 10, it's not great. But just know that we like to make really stupid laws off of oddly specific situations that will likely, I don't know, never happen. And the last one here, I just think they had to be fucking around, because if they weren't, then you know what, Kentucky might be dumber than I think it is. Hunting from moving vehicles is illegal, except for whales, which for those that don't know, Kentucky is landlocked. There's no fucking whales. Now, part of me, most of me, thinks they were just, screwing with people. Like, yeah, you can go ahead and hunt whales from your fucking pickup truck. Yeah, you can totally do that, but nothing else. Or someone legit thought there were whales in Kentucky. You know what? This country's not that bright, so I can't completely rule it out. But I will say that this state definitely has a pretty solid metal scene, and we're going to get into a little bit more. And this isn't just entirely metal. There's a lot of metallic hardcore, straight up like crust punk stuff in here too. But we got a ton of heavy music to go over, and we're going to start it off with Knocked Loose and their second album, A Different Shade of Blue. This is where I got into this awesome metallic hardcore band from Oldham County. I heard a lot of rumblings about their stuff. I picked this one up and was like, dude, this is just absolutely savage. And my love of like old school metallic hardcore, especially like that Victory Records stuff, instantly kind of made that connection. And it is amazing to see how much this band has exploded in popularity since this album. While I really enjoyed Laugh Tracks, I think it's a solid album. This one definitely propelled them more into the spotlight. The riffs were more crushing, more menacing. Brian Garris' vocals, love him or hate him. On the earlier albums, I think he sounds a lot better because his register isn't so high. You get to like their most recent album and yeah, no, he's up there a little too high, and I kind of get the whole arf jokes, but on here, he sounds good. There's a good switch up every now and then between like the guitarist's lower vocals. You have some guest spots on here as well. Emma Boster, I believe, of Dying Wish shows up on A Serpent's Touch, and Forget Your Name features Keith Buckley, formerly of Every Time I Die. But every song in here is punishing. It's got solid grooves, great riff syncopation. The production here is fucking immaculate. It is heavy through and through. And honestly, I see people bring this band up as like a gateway band into like more extreme metal, and honestly, I'm all for it. I would much rather someone start their metal journey into like the more extreme stuff with something that has like solid death metal riffs worked in, because this is loaded with hardcore breakdowns across the board. But songs like By the Grave, In the Walls, Forget Your Name, these songs have like a lot of big death metal riffs. There's like some cool tremolo harmonies and such, and how they kind of go back and forth between like just punishing riff after riff and breakdown after breakdown, but also managed to show a good balance between the more metallic stuff and the more flat out hardcore stuff. Like this is all energetic, this is all bombastic, this is all fucking just like knuckles to the face, which is something I love about this album. It feels genuine, it feels like real rage. Like every song feels like it's cathartic in a way. Whether it's shouting in your face or just chugging your face off, or like selling into like some like dark, menacing, almost more like death metal atmosphere, this album absolutely crushes, pretty much throughout the entire thing. Now this is definitely one of the more popular bands on here, but I'll still say it, if you have never jammed this album and maybe you're a little bit on the fence about Knocked Loose, strongly recommend checking this album out. I think this band's legit awesome. Believe the hype. Check them out. Abominant Warblast. This is the 8th album from this Elizabethtown melodic death metal, melodic blackened death metal. I don't know. We're going to get into that because I think this is one that, maybe the archives are a little bit off on. I got this forever ago in a Deathgasm Records like mystery box. Like, hey, like I give you this much money, you send me whatever the hell you guys got. And I got this among a bunch of other stuff too. And honestly, I hadn't revisited it for quite a while, but if I was going to say, baseline what it sounded like just kind of imagine Deicide and Angel Corpse combining. I wouldn't say it's like technical in terms of like the riff structure as Angel Corpse, but it has that sort of ferocity the entire time, and it has Glenn's love of all things Christianity all over here. Stylistically though, like again, like the melodeath thing, I mean, it kind of applies, like if you're talking about like heavier melodic death metal bands like Vehemence or Intestine Ballism, then yes, I think, maybe songs like Legacy and Pain, Endless Nightmare, Evil Inside, those do have like a little bit more melody to it, a little bit more in the way of like, harmonized riffs and like harmonized lead melodies. But everything in here is just really intense, and it kind of has like more of a snarling, blackened energy to it. The vocals kind of keep it grounded a little bit more in death metal. Like, dude's kind of got like a Glenn Benton-esque sort of roar. You do occasionally get like some higher screams to break it up, but this is blasty as hell. It's hyper aggressive. You don't get a lot of those like more melodic reflective points. Like, this isn't like, early In Flames or anything like that. This is, definitely way more feral, and, again, I think melodic death metal might be a bit of a stretch in terms of calling it this. The production has like more of a live feel on here. It's raw, it's gritty. Everything on here feels, again, like super aggressive at all times too. No Forgiveness in particular is like a thrashy fucking barn burner. Some good double time grooves in here, which this album, it's kind of missing a bit of groove, but I kind of like that like on the nose, just like quick paced, blasty energy that's all over here. Like, there's really no breaks in here. Like, there's not really like a lot of space in between songs. You just kind of keep going with this, and it's just this rapid fire, thrashy, hyper aggressive attack throughout. And honestly, it's pretty good. Well, I think it could have used like a few more moments like on Devilish Mastery, where it really settled down in like some fun riffy grooves. I still ended up digging this entire album. I like the energy, it's fast, it's brutal, and again, if you're a big fan of like Deicide and Angel Corpse in particular, and maybe like a little bit of Vehemence and like Intestine Ballism, check this out. This is the only album by this band I own, and I may actually have to pick up some more. But yeah, check them out, pretty solid stuff. Sea of Treachery, at Daggers Drawn. This is the debut album from this Hebron, Kentucky / Cincinnati, Ohio based act. I already covered Ohio. I'm going to give this one to Kentucky. Honestly, we call Cincy Cincinnati all the time, so, it kind of works. Anyway, this is a metalcore / melodic death metal act. Came out in 2008 on Sumerian Records. This is one of those early Sumerian core bands before the label kind of, just went every place else other than the stuff that they signed initially. But yeah, by the time this came out, I was already big into like Born of Osiris and The Faceless, and I was willing to check out just about anything that came out in this label, and I picked this one up. And honestly, I think by the time this one came out, this album sounded possibly a little dated for the style, because this kind of sounded a little bit more like early 2000s metalcore, melodic metalcore, like the very At the Gates driven stuff, which this is absolutely chock full of At the Gates riffs. By 2008, like deathcore had started to become like the big thing. Even Sumerian knew that. I think like Conducting for the Grave came out maybe a year later on this label. But I still enjoyed this style in particular, like that more At the Gatesy style. Like, I was still am a huge fan of bands like, Darkest Hour, Light This City, Knights of the Abyss, and, at least back in the day, As I Lay Dying. This band was kind of right in lockstep with that sound. I will say that they kind of balanced out the metalcore and the melodeath stuff. Like, it felt a little bit more separate. Like, you'd get like the big metalcore, chuggy breakdowns, gang vocals, but you get into like more melodeath territory with like harmonized tremolos. Those arguably stock At the Gates riffs, it was kind of all over here, but it was arranged really well. Vocally, I really enjoyed the harsh vocals. They're kind of a two-tiered one. There's some that are a little bit lower and kind of a mid-range sort of scream. There are clean vocals. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I never have been. When bands do that more At the Gates style of like melodic metalcore, I do like it when they stay harsh for the most part. Like, there's definitely some bands that can get away with clean vocals because the clean vocals are really good, like Killswitch Engage. Both Howard and Jesse are fantastic vocalists. He sounded very like made for Warped Tour. Like, if this was a gear shift, you'd be going from like Darkest Hour and shifting right into Asking Alexandria. And that shows up on songs like Unleash the Serpents, An Endless Cycle of Torture, Back to the Surface, On the Wings of Pegasus. They're all very soaring and very bright, and again, designed for like a big, I would say like post-hardcore kind of sing-along, but they're just not for me, and sometimes they don't line up. But for the most part, when this band is just like on it, on the breakdowns, the riffs, they're really solid. And Angels Were Silent was a particular favorite of mine. I really like the riff harmonies on that one. And on every song, there were absolutely killer riffs. And I will say that if this was released like 4 years earlier, like if this came out in 2004 rather than 2008, there's a better chance that I think more people would probably know this band. And who knows, this might have been regarded as a like metalcore, melodeath classic back then. But for me, I think it's just a really solid album that might have come out just a little bit too late. I did get a chance to see these guys, God, I want to say like not too long after the pandemic lifted. And they did sound pretty good live. Granted, there were some like technical issues, but that's Toledo. But yeah, if you're a big fan of, like, again, Darkest Hour, Ninth the Abyss, and again, like a little bit of like early As I Lay Dying and stuff like that, check this out. It's still pretty good. Dead Child, Attack. This is the lone full length from this Louisville heavy metal act. I picked this up years ago, actually 2008, I believe. Yep, that's when it came out. A buddy of mine played one track off of this, and I was kind of confused, but I was drawn in. Now, an interesting thing about this band, before I go into their music, is that none of the guys that are in this band were in metal bands before. Like, they just all decided they wanted to do a metal band. They were all like more punk and hardcore and indie rock bands. And the style they chose is more of a straight up old school heavy metal sound, but kind of turned on its head in a way. It's got like kind of like a bigger, more hardcore-ish like guitar tone, but they're playing classic heavy metal riffs. And it kind of generates almost like the same weird charm that draws you into like, you know, a Voivod album. Like, the vocals on here sound quirky and odd. There are points in here where it sounds like it's Jello Biafra fronting like Dio era Sabbath. There is like a little bit of like up-tempo punky energy in songs like Sweet Chariots, Never Bet the Devil Your Head, Screaming Skull, and Angel of the Odd. Yeah, the song titles are really strange in here. The first song I heard on here was the song Wasp Riot. And I don't know what that song's about, but I know it is infectious. It's very based on like, you know, a repetitive, like kind of like chuggy syncopation with a really cool, like fun guitar layering. When it comes down to like how they approach like classic heavy metal, because that is definitely the style I would say this is at its roots, there's not a lot of like the giant tropes of the style at the same time. Like, there's not a lot of big riff harmonies. A lot of the riffs are based on like clever syncopation and like some like fun interplay, but they're not doing like, you know, Iron Maiden and Angel Witch style harmonies all the time. That and the vocal approach is not very characteristic of like classic heavy metal either. It's not, you know, 80s Wailer. You have some guy that has an odd voice like, you know, Jello or Snake, but they're not doing punk or thrash or anything like that. And the whole album just feels a little like off kilter in a way, but at the same time it is infectiously catchy. But there's a lot of like fun, clever hooks in here that are, you know, I don't know, like not in line with like being like retroactive. Like, again, the guitar tone doesn't feel like they're trying to go for a classic tone. It's like non-trad metal, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I really enjoy this album, and this is a one and done here, so if you can find it, I strongly recommend checking it out. Not sure if they'll ever resurrect this project. I think every member of this band has a whole bunch of other projects, but this is just legit kind of like a musical oddity. Again, if you're a big fan of, man, like Voivod, again, like there's like classic heavy metal I would compare it to, like, again, like Dio and like Sabbath era Dio, I would say, but the weird riff patterns and like hardcore syncopation, but it's not like kind of like drifting outside of the bounds of heavy metal, but it kind of is. I don't know. Trust me, just check it out. It's a weird listen, but it's a lot of fun. Breather Resist, Only in the Morning EP. This is the debut EP from this Louisville hardcore / mathcore act. Kind of short-lived, and, well, I mean, they kind of broke up and became, well, the next band that I'll go over. But this album is vicious, spazzy, atonal, short, violent, very comparable to bands like Converge, Every Time I Die, Coalesce, Botch, but also with tinges of like really interesting atmospheric melodies and shimmering guitars. Like, there's a little bit of like early Cave-In, but also like kind of that, you know, next wave around like Jupiter and like Tides of Tomorrow. But it's jagged. Like, all the transitions come at you rapid fire. You get those squawky alarm clock riffs that I love so much. It's cynical, dark. The vocals sound like the dude's on the point of exhaustion after like a couple of screams. It Stops One in particular is one of my favorites. There's some really fun guitar panning breakdown in there that's just violent and explosive. The drum work in here you know, is just insane. Like, you know, very much along the lines of like Converge, like frequently doing like fills and such, some off time, like more jazzy stuff occasionally, and then going right into like full bore, like just hardcore D beats. The production on here, gritty, it's gnarly, it almost sounds like a fucking live show in here. In fact, they kind of try to make it sound like a live show. The opening track, Just Do It, features crowd noise and applause. And then the last track, It Stops Too, is loaded with crowd noise at the end of the song for about 3 minutes. They loop the crowd clapping for about 3 minutes. It just felt like a bit much. But as I said, this band ended up being like very short-lived. I think they only put out one full length and maybe another EP, if I'm not mistaken. This is the only thing I've ever owned by this band, and honestly, I didn't become familiar with this band until I checked out the band that they became, which is the band I'll go over next. And honestly, they're semi-similar, but you know, this one definitely takes the cake for just pure, unadulterated, violent rage. Like, this is fits of just manic musical violence, and I dig the hell out of it. It's a very short listen. I want to say it's maybe 25 minutes if I remember right. It might be shorter than that. But if you like any of the bands that I brought up in terms of like early mathcore and such, definitely check this out. Absolutely nasty album. Young Widows, Easy Pain. This is the fourth album from this Louisville sludge noise / post-hardcore act. This is what Breather Resist became. Breather Resist broke up in 2006, and the same year they formed Young Widows, and I've been pretty much a fan ever since. I got into them with their album Old Wounds. I actually heard that Nate Newton from Converge and, well, now Cave In was also on there, and I was pretty much just in love with all the noisy feedback and, you know, nasty, sludgy riffs. It's kind of like dirty, dark, kind of, I don't know, like rigid sounding music that this band produced, and I think this was probably the album that I would say was their best. Now, I'm not calling this necessarily metal, but I mean, it's damn heavy, and I wanted to throw it in here, and you know, who knows, it might show up in a heavy but not metal thing somewhere down the line, but it definitely represents like just a dingier, darker side of just like the heavy music that comes out of the state. There's elements of like slide guitar, there's lurching blues riffs all over here. The guitar tone, it's not necessarily metallic, but it's, again, like it's dense, it's heavy, it's muddy. There's like an ugly kind of like southern twang to everything that melds itself into like just how heavy and dense these songs are. The vocals sound despondent, exhausted. Like, they kind of stripped all of the mathcore elements out here and a lot of the speed, because a lot of these songs are lumbering and slow. They sound like they're dragging themselves out of bed after a long fucking night of drinking. At times the bass even drowns out the guitars with how just huge it fucking sounds. And all these like noisy layers on here and despondent vocals and like weird off-time rhythms, it creates this very like uneasy, unnerving sort of atmosphere in here. You definitely feel that on songs like Cool Night and Doomed Man. Like, there's just this tension in the atmosphere, and how they release tension. Sometimes it's a slow build, sometimes it's all of a sudden you just get hit with the most massive sludgy riff they could come up with. Or sometimes they do with like looped effects and like weird layered guitars. You get these like strange sort of like rhythmic pulses to the songs. They sound just a little bit off, but oddly tuneful. Like, there's a lot of like really interesting kind of like heavy indie rock hooks on here. King Soul, Kerosene Girl, The Gift of Failure, which is probably one of the heaviest tracks on this entire album. They have, again, like solid melodies, but they're like a little turned on their head. Like, there's nothing on this album I would say like kind of like generates like a traditional hook. Like, they're hooky in the sense that like Jesus Lizard or like Melvins are hooky. It's off the wall and creates its own little weird earworms, which, I don't know, that sounds like an album by either one of those bands. I don't know, the whole listening experience on here is strange. Like, at moments it's cathartic, sometimes it's like hypnotic with its, you know, repetitive like looping noises and such. Sometimes it's just very like unnerving, and then at other times it is absolutely scathing, but it makes for a very dynamic listen overall. And I mean, if you're a big fan of, you know, Jesus Lizard, Melvins, honestly, there's some stuff in here that's kind of comparable to Chat Pile too. Check this album out and then check out the rest of their stuff too, because this band's pretty wild and all over the place. Like, I don't think any of their albums, at least the ones that I own, sound anything alike, but they're all pretty damn good in their own way. But yeah, check this one out to start with. Gates to Hell, Death Comes to All. This is the second album from this Louisville-based death metal / metallic hardcore blend. Again, this is the stuff that we probably should have called deathcore, but we called deathcore. Anyway, hair splitting aside, I got in this band with their self-titled album from 2022. I thought it was pretty awesome. And then I saw this band got signed by Nuclear Blast Records not long before I saw them with Frozen Soul and Enforced. And yeah, this band absolutely whoops ass. And I'll even say that this is even better than their debut. This is straight to the point, riffy, groovy, punishing, brutal as hell. There are very few songs in here that make it past the 2-minute mark. And I think only the last track, Fused with the Soil, which I would say is their long magnum opus, is the only track over 3 minutes. And it is, again, just over 3 minutes. Like, I don't even think it sniffs at 4. But for as short as these songs are, they're very dynamic. They're loaded with riff changes. Think bands like Creeping Death, 200 Stab Wounds, especially in terms of those quick riff changes, like that's a very 200 Stab Wounds sort of style there. But this also packs a lot of like gnarly Sanguisugabog style grooves on here. And they're really good about switching on and off between like flat out death metal tremolos and like big gnarly squealy death metal riffs to just savage syncopated hardcore breakdowns. All songs are concise, they're sharp, nothing hangs out too long. And surprisingly, nothing hangs out too short. I feel like they don't try to pack too many riff changes in each song. There's just enough to keep them interesting from like being just like a one note, little like, all right, we have our groove spot, we have our blast spot, we got a 2-step. All right, let's fuck off to the next song. There's a lot of cool stuff mixed up on here. The production here, I think, is excellent too. You get a lot of build up into the breakdowns, especially like some just gnarly slowdowns. But I love the death metal moments on here, and it's like a particularly like old school meets like a little bit of brutal death style. Songs like Weeping in Pain, 21 Sacraments, the title track, Craze Killer, Locked Out. These songs just have like some absolutely pronounced, vicious death metal riffs. But when they shift into the more hardcore related stuff, the momentum is maintained. Honestly, there are points in here that kind of sounds like Knocked Loose, except with like, you know, flat out death metal vocals. But yeah, this is the newest album I have on here. This came out this year, and I don't know if it's going to be a year ender for me, but I know I love the shit out of it. It's only 21 minutes long, but it is all killer and no filler. And if you trim your fucking full length down to 21 minutes, it better be nothing but killer at that point. But yeah, if you're a big fan again of 200 Stab Wounds, Sanguisugabog, Creeping Death, and again, like a little bit of Knocked Loose and like even like some Suffocation too, check this out. Absolutely banging album. My Own Victim, No Voice, No Rights, No Freedom. This was the third album from this Louisville metallic hardcore act. I got into this band through Century Media comps, because even back in the day, Century Media did sign hardcore bands. It's how I discovered Marauder. But I remember hearing the song Walls Apart on one of the ID series. I can't remember which one. It might have been 3D. That might have been the one, I don't know. But the band style fit in a lot with what I was listening to in terms of like hardcore, metallic hardcore. It had, you know, like Earth Crisis style grooves. It occasionally leaned more on the punky side, like there's a little bit of like Sick of It All to them. It had a lot of that Hatebreed sort of like energy and conviction to it. I fucking dug it. Yeah, it was pretty much a layup. But I didn't find a copy of this album until much, much later. In fact, I think it was one of the trips down to Florida where I would buy everything that I could find within, I don't know, 5 or 6 different record stores in the Tampa St. Pete area. But listening to this album, this band had a little bit more than just straight up hardcore, metallic hardcore. There was a lot of like just good groove metal on here. You get like Southern Fried riffage that pops up every now and then, and Unjustified and Slave. There's a lot of like, you know, I wouldn't say like necessarily like Pantera style groove metal, but I mean, it feels like it kind of leans towards that. Maybe a little bit of like Ex-Hoarder too. There's a lot of like 90s groove metal charm to it, but there's still fast-paced, D-beat barn burners on here. And a lot of like good socio-political themed lyrics. Like these were, you know, a little bit more from the street, talking about their life, their perspective, and, you know, the world around them. And yeah, I mean, you know, there's some stuff in here that's still very relevant today for damn sure. All the hardcore sensibilities, you know, combined with like a lot of good like 90s hardcore and metal tropes. I think this album is absolutely awesome. good guitar tone. There's good thrashy, almost crossover sections. The vocals are well delivered. You get good gang vocal spots, which I'm always down for that. And again, like some fun surprises. Like I really wasn't expecting a very clutch-like boogie at the end of Cornered, but they pulled it off pretty damn well. Now this is the only album I own by the band, and I definitely plan on getting more, but if you're a big fan of, again, like Earth Crisis, Madball, Sick of It All, Hatebreed, Agnostic Front, and again, a little bit of like 90s thrash metal and groove metal kind of mixed into, check this album out. Damn good. Coliseum, self-titled. This is the debut album from this Louisville-based, then hardcore act. They kind of changed their sound later on to like more, I don't know, like heavy indie rock. Kind of hard to describe. Honestly, this is a band that I plan on bringing up in like a heavy but not metal thing in the future, just because, I don't know, they were just kind of like hard to pigeonhole into one style. I got in this band with their album No Salvation, which was on Relapse Records, and that was like just flat out vicious hardcore banger. And I was like, sweet, this is absolutely awesome. And then the next one I picked up, I swear, sounded like more like a, I don't know, like a dark indie rock band's take on Bruce Springsteen. Not bad, just not what I was expecting. But somewhere along the line, I ended up getting this Death Wish reissue of their first album, and this is possibly this band at their most vicious. This is D-beat, sludgy, hardcore. Every song is yelled, it's in your face, it's brimming with intensity. Think bands like Discharge, Dysphere, Doom Riders, maybe even a touch of Exploited. The songs snarl at you. It's got more raw production. The guitars have this like menacing kind of squawky fuzz to them. The bass is huge. The drums sound like they're just being beaten into submission. You do get some more occasional chuggy metallic riffs every now and then on Hostage of Privilege, Claim Control, Burnout Bright a little bit too. You can feel the energy on this album. It feels like a live show fueled by piss, vinegar, and, well, I mean, it's Kentucky, so obviously bourbon. But you do occasionally get spots of melody, or at least like some good harmonized punk riffs. This mind locked inside this body. The simple answer is Pretty Situation. You know, just enough melody kind of like lift you up for like a brighter chorus before they come fucking right back with like something stupid heavy like No Salvation, which that's probably the most converged sounding song on the album, where it's a little bit spazzier and arguably maybe a little bit more metallic. In terms of this being like metal, there's not like a tremendous amount on here I would say is flat out metal, but I would say every single second on here is heavier than hell. And if you've never jammed this band and you want to hear them at their heaviest, it's this one and probably No Salvation. I do really like a lot of their later work. It's just a lot different than this. It almost sounds like an entirely different band. I had the pleasure of seeing them once when they were still touring on like the heavy, like more hardcore stuff they were doing. But sadly, I believe this band broke up, God, back in like the 2010s maybe. I don't know. I think their entire discography is awesome, but if you want them at their heaviest, this and No Salvation in particular, check them out. This is an absolute banger. Gaebaleia, I don't know how to say this band's name. Anyway, this album's called Blood Now Flows. It came out in 2003. This is the lone full length from this Radcliffe-based melodic death metal act. And I believe I got this in the same grab bag as I got Abominant, because, I mean, they're both on Deathgasm, and the first band they thank on here is Abominant, which I believe the drummer on this album went on to play in Abominant. Anyway, another one I hadn't listened to in a while, and I will admit, like, this, in terms of production, is very raw. It sounds like a demo. And I'll also say that I believe one of the reasons why this band was short-lived is sadly their frontman passed in a car wreck, I believe, in the late 2010s. So they really never had another chance to make, like, another full length, but overall, this embodies a lot of like old melodic death metal tropes that I like. Like this is more in line with, you know, a lot of bands like, you know, early In Flames, At the Gates. No clean vocals on here. This is all about like the riffs and the harmonies that they generate. But this also squeezes in a lot of like just groovy old school death metal. It's almost like a weird mix of like Lunar Strain era In Flames, but with like kind of like an Obituary or like Bolt Thrower-esque sort of like groove to it. Sounds like Prophet of Demise and Embraced by Torture definitely embody that. You get a good balance though. Like I do like the fact that they mix up the riffs. Like all of a sudden it sounds very Swedish and then boom, we're kind of back down to like like, I don't know, Florida swamps. This also reminded me a lot of End Forsaken, which was a very short-lived U.S. Melodic death metal band. I believe they were from Chicago. But this came out in 2003, and this is like during a time where, like, you know, almost anything like melodic death metal oriented in the U.S. seemed to just become melodic death metal meets metalcore. But this didn't sound like that. It sounded like old school melodic death metal from like the early to mid 90s being played by, you know, dudes that probably listen to like old school death metal from the 90s from the US. Now again, it does have its issues. I don't think the production here is very good. The vocals in particular, how they're actually done, kind of bothers me. Like the vocals themselves, if they would just pick one, because a lot of it is like this permanent high-low layering that gets kind of annoying. Like if they just picked like the low register for a section and then the high register for a section and weren't constantly blending it throughout the entire album, I might have liked it a little bit more. But for the most part, I think this is pretty solid. There's some good faster tracks in here. Occasionally you get like some blastier moments. The riff work, while it is very meat and potatoes, it's still very catchy. There's a lot of catchy harmonies across the board in here. It's a pretty solid album with a few rough edges, but it's definitely worth checking out. So yeah, if you like old school melodic death metal and old school US death metal, this is definitely a combination of the two, and if you can make it past the production here, I think you'll be fine. Panopticon, Autumn Eternal. This is the 7th album from this then Louisville-based one-man folk/pagan black metal act / atmospheric black metal act. I don't know. This band's hard to describe. Now, Austin now lives in Wisconsin, and that is like his base of operations now. But back in the day, he lived in Kentucky, and I'm counting it for this because I covered Wisconsin and all their death metal. And I wanted to cover this band in some capacity because in terms of like US black metal, this band's one of my favorites. There is something absolutely magical about what Austin does with his songwriting, his atmosphere. This is like Appalachian Enslaved. It captures all the rustic beauty of like sunsets over rolling green mountains and, you know, babbling brooks. There's just something so magical about the atmosphere on his albums that just transports you to the setting. But it's the songwriting and the sense of dynamics in here that just blows me away. This can go from like a very intimate setting, like strumming on a porch and, you know, listening to lap steels and such, to grand, epic, soaring black metal tremolos and huge harmonies. And that can happen in a second. That can happen in the period of a slow build. The songs like Pale Ghosts and Oaks Ablaze, like you hear those giant swells of these huge, shimmering, bright guitars. They're absolutely soaring, but heavier than hell. Like this has moments where it gets down to those like big stampeding, you know, double time grooves. Something you would associate with like, you know, bands like Immortal, but also bands like Wolves in the Throne Room. The title track in particular has these like energetic, you know, machine gun riffs, and again, that stampeding, just energetic fucking drum work. And Austin does everything on here, I believe. At least as far as like, you know, guitars, bass, and drums. He might have had some extra people do like some of these strings or lap steels or whatever, but he does pretty much everything on here, and my god, the dude's just insanely talented. At least in my experience with like one-person bands, you can generally pick out where that person might be like less proficient with like a certain instrument. They've been doing everything super well, but the drum work's a little bit off, or like maybe the bass just doesn't sound right. Austin clearly doesn't have that issue because everything in here sounds tight. It sounds well thought out. All the songs have like standout parts that separate them. You know, different moods, different atmospheres. Oaks Ablaze has some like really snarling, aggressive sections on there that honestly I didn't pick up on any other tracks. Sleep to the Sound of the Waves Crashing has a lot of like second wave elements, you know, heavy in the dark, distant tremolos. It even incorporates some waves for some additional atmosphere. But one of my personal favorites is A Superior Lament, which has, I don't know, like these like almost beautiful goth rock passages. It has like these shimmering riffs that are very, very akin to like Cave-In's Jupiter, albeit played with like more of a black metal sort of vibe to it because this band's black metal. There's great vocal harmonies on it, like there's like post-punk elements. The bass work in particular on that song is just absolutely amazing. The whole song is beautiful. Like that one's one of the biggest standouts for me, but this entire album is absolutely amazing, and I still only own like 2 Panopticon albums, and I need to fucking fix that. But this one, if you're going to start somewhere with Panopticon, I would strongly recommend this. I think this is an absolutely beautiful album. And I imagine he's probably written some that are even better than this. I just need to get around to listening to him. But yeah, check this out. Absolutely amazing piece of work. And finally, and this album had to be last because of all the things that I'm going to have to say in terms of song titles and album titles, we have Lords with their second album, Fuck All Y'all Motherfuckers. Figure maybe if I put this one at the end, YouTube won't have as much of an issue with it, but I don't know, who knows. Anyway, this is the second album from this Louisville-based hardcore act. I picked this one up on a whim. Well, alright, it might have just been because of the name of the album and the fact that it was on Black Market Activities, which I do really enjoy that label. But this is absolutely ridiculous, over the top, straight up fucking hardcore. Like, this isn't metallic hardcore. This is just fast-paced, unruly, fucking irreverent, cynical, mean-spirited hardcore, and I love every second of it. The songs are short, they are silly, they probably inspire acts of vandalism or arson, and you get a good sense of this band's sense of humor right from the rip here. With the opening track, this isn't a song, dumbass. And they're right. Maybe not that I'm a dumbass, but, you know, I'm pretty sure that's up for debate. But it's this hilarious skit intro that they did live to start off their album. One of the members is clearly on stage talking shit to the audience. The audience is talking shit back. It's great. You know, the song titles in here are great. One of my personal favorites is the third track, Why I Don't Give a Fuck. That might be explained somewhere in all the D beats and savage riffs and shit and just shouty fucking, you know, mean-spirited everything in that song. But, you know, I miss it every time. I just headbang my ass off. Songs like Fucking With Fire, the 15th track, Man, Everything Sucks. Yeah, pretty much everything about this album is fucked up and probably designed to just offend the living shit out of someone. Yeah, like the entire album cover in here, like this little version censored. I don't know if I have the censored version up there, but if I don't, then I'm definitely gonna censor it because the rest of it's fucking, dude, it's just wrong. But musically, this is a lot of fun. It's a downhill run of an album. Again, D-beats, sludgy, raw production. There's no waning points of energy on here. It's spazzy, it's reckless. This album might even have fucking warrants. It sounds very similar to like early Every Time I Die, Converge, Give Up the Ghost / American Nightmare. It's the kind of band that I am always down to see live. Like, if I saw this band was playing at fucking Frankie's tonight, I wouldn't be recording this video. I'd be there watching them possibly get arrested. Because this and everything else that I've listened to by this band, I mean, it sounds like the soundtrack to like a home invasion. Or maybe even the police standoff that follows the home invasion. I don't know. What I do know though is it's a blast to listen to, and there are like some fun wrinkles every now and then, like Fucking With Fire has some really cool blues riffs to it. Blasphemy Act has like, you know, machine gun thrash riffs and a little bit of Slayer energy to it. This whole album is absolutely fucking awesome. And if you like any of the bands I brought up, plus irreverent, dark humor and music that kind of like talks shit to you, then it's this, Lords. Check it out. It's fucking awesome. And that will do it for Kentucky, or at least all the Kentucky stuff that I have. And after this, I am on to a couple other states, and we're going to get a little bit more southern for a while, and then probably eventually make our way back out west, where there's a lot of stuff we haven't touched there either. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and a lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which we will let you guys know when we decide to do that. We'll probably put it up in the community. Either way, membership's the main way to support the channel, and if you'd like to join up, there's a join button down below for you to smash, headbutt, drop a fucking elbow on. However the hell you want to do it, do it. It's your device. You can do whatever the hell you want to it. And if it's not your device, then maybe be like a little bit more careful. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, following, subscribing, all that stuff. It means the world to us. Tons of content coming in the future. Hopefully, by the point this one comes out, you know, John's a little bit more healed up. I believe Shred should be back. We're gonna kind of get down to some other like group videos we need to do too. But I'm also gonna keep working on these in the time being. Also working on maybe another collection update in the future because, well, I mean, I thought I got caught up and then more cool shit came out that we didn't have time to review. Imagine that. But yeah, tons of stuff coming in the future. So one more big thank you because you guys are fucking awesome, and we will catch you later.